I'm Zuber-Skerritt, the producer of this second series of video programs on postgraduate research and supervision. This video series has been produced simply from recordings of a residential staff development program on postgraduate research and supervision held at the Pan Pacific Hotel on the Queensland Gold Coast in September 1993. The aim of this series is to provide supervisors and postgraduate students with resources to understand and improve their postgraduate studies in their department or institution.
I think the indicators of performance in research are the indicators that are important. The communication of results of data that one collects in research in refereed high-quality journals. I think the attraction of funds for research from external funding agencies, and I believe the number of degrees that are awarded to postgraduate students. But over all of that, I believe that a distinctive research culture that's present in the environment in which one works is a very important indicator of good research.
Good quality research, to my mind, firstly, is research that has been peer-reviewed and has been considered by experts to be of excellent performance, and also which is making an ongoing and continuing contribution to a field of knowledge. In terms of key indicators, the sorts of indicators that one would normally look for are those associated with peer-reviewed publications or some other product of research that has been determined by experts once again to make a ongoing and valuable contribution to a field. Secondly, one would look at the outcomes of research, particularly in terms of research postgraduates, the excellence of their work, their publication records, also their placement in industry or in academia or other research areas, their standing in the research community after they've graduated. I think that's a good indicator of quality research. And thirdly, I would see that the researchers themselves, the recognition by their peers, by international research granting agencies, by national granting agencies, by professional bodies, and by other expert groups, I think would provide a good indicator that a person is an excellent researcher or a quality researcher. And finally, for those areas of research for which citations are available for publications, I would look on citation indices as an indicator of quality research, as long as the citations are associated with positive features of the research rather than negative features. And I think that would be another indicator of research. So I think those four would be the first that would come to my mind with respect to indicators of quality research.
That question is one that's really focusing all our minds nationally at the moment. I think I'd like to answer that in two ways. Firstly, at the systems level, and secondly, at the individual level. If we take it at the systems level, we're asked to look at what we do in research in relation to the university's mission and goal statements. And if you take, say, my university, we judge quality research at the systems level by the degree to which it contributes to the professions, knowledge for the professions, and the degree to which it brings benefit to the community. If we turn to the individual level and we try to gauge the quality of research, then I think there's one system that we've had in place which really gives us the key indicators, and that, of course, is peer review. And peer review enables our peers, who are at the forefront of the areas of research that we're interested in, to indicate whether our work is worth publishing in an international journal of high quality status, whether we can present it at international conferences, whether it's worthy of being put into a monograph or whatever. So how does the peer review system work? Well, peers nationally and internationally look at what we've written and they judge, is the idea interesting, is it innovative, does it contribute to theory, and so on. And secondly, they look at the quality of the research design. Has the study been well conceived? Is the sampling good? The interpretations made from the data or whatever appropriate? So this peer review process, I think, is one of the most powerful ways of ensuring quality of research. I think there's been a lot of debate nationally about what key performance indicators are for quality research. And I think we have to take a discipline-specific approach, because while in the sciences it might be the number of overseas conferences and the number of international journal articles that are the index, perhaps in the humanities and social sciences it might be whether you've got a good book coming out every 2 or 3 years, whether you've been able to give a major piece of performance in one of the visual or performing arts. So there's quite a bit of debate and discussion on this. I think probably the other index of high quality research is the quality of the postgraduate students that you're able to attract to your institution, because it's said that about 50% of the research that's produced in universities is produced by PhD students. So an index of quality is the quality of their recruitment and the quality of their training.
I think a good environment for research should be one that's well resourced, that what's necessary to do the research is available, so the infrastructure must be present. I think the environment must be an environment that is respected and valued by one's peers. I think the research environment itself must be alive and flourishing, and it must be distinctive. And I believe that the vigorous presence of a research culture and well-resourced to do research are probably 2 essential indicators.
The characteristics for a good environment research, I think, first of all, come about associated with the staff that are employed by an institution. An institution needs to make sure that they have high-quality staff and experienced researchers, or researchers that have excellent or good prospects for research development. Secondly, I think researchers need good access to infrastructure, appropriate equipment, laboratories in scientific areas, libraries, information services, and also other associated infrastructure for different fields of study. Thirdly, I think in some areas researchers need access to regular ongoing research grant support. This is a very important feature of scientific and engineering areas, and I think if we're going to have a good research environment, then there needs to be an environment in which there is adequate finance and infrastructure to provide for maintenance and other ongoing support. Other features that I've found is where you have a good esprit de corps that exists within the research group, and usually one finds a good research environment does involve more than 1 or 2 people. There is, I think, a critical mass needed for research, and particularly in some areas of science and engineering, but also in areas of humanities and social sciences. I think a group environment is very conducive to providing support for researchers, particularly for research postgraduate students who are learning in these particular areas. So how do you encourage all that? Well, I think first of all it comes down to 3 levels of responsibility for encouraging them. We have first of all an institutional encouragement, which needs to first of all recognise the key role of research in a university or other institution undertaking research, and there needs to be ongoing support available to research postgraduate students and to research staff and academics to continue with their research. Secondly, there needs to be the support established in the environment of the department or faculty or school, in which the head of school is committed to establishing a good research environment for staff or research postgraduate students and others undertaking research. And thirdly, I think at the level of the individual, they need to be motivated in research areas in terms of being aware that there is a need for ongoing training in research, for updating one's knowledge, particularly for newer members of staff to undertake research postgraduate student workshops, to try and promote the idea of co-supervision for research postgraduate students in collaboration in these days of research in which there's a high level of competition associated with various research programs. and a high level of specialisation. I think it's important in order for us to be able to undertake really major problems. It's important to undertake those in collaboration with others where appropriate. So I think a teamwork environment, promoting of that at the level of the school and at the individual level are very, very important. And finally, I think the availability of funding to researchers to undertake research postgraduate programs is absolutely critical. The recognition of that funding from the institution is absolutely essential. And to do that, one needs to establish a competitive environment for attracting grants and attracting support to particular research programs.
I think probably the most important characteristic of a good research environment is what I'd call the intellectual culture or the ethos. What do I mean by this? I mean an environment that respects ideas, that encourages people to explore, to solve problems, to go out there and to try to get research monies, to try and encourage research students. So it's a kind of a culture that's accepting of ideas, but is also dynamic and to a little extent partly entrepreneurial. Now, I think that is the most important aspect. But the second aspect I think that's terribly important is what I'd call research infrastructure. Research infrastructure refers to library holdings, to space, to equipment, to computing and information technology. And on the national scene, we've found that resources have not been able to support this for almost over a decade to the extent that's been required. In fact, there was a very important report recently, the Boston Consulting Report, saying that about $135 million needed to be put into research infrastructure nationally. So for us to really be competitive internationally in terms of international best practices, we really need to put money into research infrastructure. The third element, I think, other than what I've said in relation to the ethos and culture and research infrastructure, relates to the support we give to our staff. We need to support them in a number of ways in terms of looking at teaching loads, the amount of administration they do, their total workload, if you like. And we need to encourage them to develop networks within the institution and nationally and internationally so that they can be in contact with their colleagues who are working in similar fields. In some fields, of course, scientists are used to working in teams or in centres. In other disciplines, it's more usual for people to work alone. But in either of those kinds of settings, I think it's just important for networks to be formed so that academics across the world can be supporting each other intellectually, reading each other's drafts, going to each other's conferences, and so on. So I'd put that as a terribly important aspect of that. Now, you asked the question, how can we encourage and develop this good research environment further? I think at the management level, we need to look at how we distribute resources across the system. I think most universities today, and certainly my own, we're trying to have schemes which encourage new researchers to apply for research grants within the institution and externally. We try to have schemes that reward meritorious researchers or those who we say have research excellence. We try to encourage them to apply for funding in a number of ways. However, funding isn't everything, as we're also interested in the outputs from that funding. But I think resource management and encouragement to apply for grants, externally or internally, is vital to the maintenance of a good quality research environment. Other things that we can do are to provide leadership at many levels in the organisation. Certainly senior management has to be seen to be supportive of the research culture, has to put resources there, but at the governance level of the department or the school or the faculty, deans have to show this in their value systems, heads of schools and heads of schools in their interactions with individual staff have to be supportive, interested, celebrating the successes of their staff and their students, and I think that's a terribly important way. So I think staff development is one way of getting senior managers and individual staff members to appreciate the opportunities and the constraints and to work together constructively to build a better system.
I think one of the key issues that's in research and in training is infrastructure. One must have the underlying fabric of research in place. One must have adequate resources to do research. I think that in terms of doing research, I think you should have a code of ethics that characterises research practice. That goes also for training. There should be a code of supervision. And I think there should be double accountability. I think researchers are accountable for what they do, and the environment in which they're placed is an environment where the people who manage that should be accountable too. In terms of managing, I think it's very important to foster initiative at the grassroots level, both in research and training, so that people at the basic units of a structure, such as departments, are working themselves to build up the culture which establishes a good research environment. I think one other thing that's common to both research and training is we need to develop a policy about the conduct of good research and a policy relating to the establishment of a research culture. I think we need structures to follow that policy up, follow it through. And I think there needs to be an appreciation of the diversity of good research that exists, say, in a university environment. There are many different kinds of research, many different disciplines, many different problems. And I think that without an appreciation of that diversity, we can't really have a genuine good research culture.
I think the first key issue is the issue of appointing quality staff to an organisation. That's, I think, the first and most important starting point, to make sure that you are appointing research quality staff or staff that have significant potential for becoming quality researchers for those newer researchers in the field. Secondly, from my point of view as a research manager at a university here in Brisbane, the establishment of competitive procedures for allocating funds, both in terms of research postgraduate scholarships and also for research grants. I think that's an excellent mechanism to ensure that the funds are being delivered to those researchers who are of the highest quality and are competing well, not only within the university, but outside. The third issue is one to do with infrastructure and support. There needs to be, I think, a readily identifiable mechanism for the university, for the institution, to make available funds to departments, schools and faculties who are supporting quality research programs and quality research postgraduate training activities, and so that there is a readily identifiable mechanism by which staff who are training significant numbers of research postgraduate students and are achieving a quality result in terms of publications and performance can have access to continuing funding to support those particular activities. There are also issues associated with training programs, particularly for faculty staff and other researchers, so that they can undertake research training by way of outside studies programs, research development programs, research postgraduate training for supervision and other associated activities. I think there needs to be a culture of ongoing development in one's knowledge about research and about training, particularly with respect to training research postgraduate students. I think the move towards multiple supervision as far as research training is concerned is an important one to develop the opportunity for research postgraduate students to be able to seek advice from more than one supervisor. Sometimes dialogue does get stifled with respect to one supervisor, and I think having multiple supervisors designated from day one in a research postgraduate program is an important policy to at least raise within the university.
Well, I think for many institutions today, the key issue is how to manage the new philosophy, which is called research concentration and selectivity, against the very real need to broaden the base of the research culture across the university. And this key tension between breadth and concentration and selectivity has enormous implications for resource allocation and for the development of research infrastructure in a university. So I see that as probably one of the major elements confronting the system nationally. Secondly, I think that the system is being challenged by the need to demonstrate that its research is of benefit to the community. I think in this age of accountability, no matter how good your research is, how excellent your research infrastructure is, there's a very real community demand for accountability. So one of the challenges now that research managers have to face is trying to convince those who pay for the funding of research that it brings benefit to the community and to the nation. And this is increasingly seen in terms of benefit to Australia's economic competitiveness. So I would place those as two of the major challenges. The third one is relating to whether we should make the system more open to fee-paying students for postgraduate studies. And this is completely a new aspect of our current thinking. And if so, then it raises a whole new set of problems to manage in terms of recruiting high degree students overseas, having full fee-paying students, in what areas, making our courses more marketable in competition with the USA and the UK. So I see that as a very important element in managing research today. I think there's another one that perhaps is worth mentioning too, as with this growth in accountability, this pressure on research infrastructure, the greater accountability in terms of staff appraisal and how resources and so on and systems are managed, I think there's a danger of perhaps over-managing. And I think one of the challenges for management is not to over-manage, but to get that proper mix of central control and devolution to faculties and schools and departments, but conscious of the need to always be accountable in the current context. Now, you asked a second part to the question. You asked what are the key issues in relation to quality training for postgraduate students. And I'd refer back to an issue I raised earlier, infrastructure. I think if we can't provide quality infrastructure for our postgraduate students, then I don't think we should be encouraging them into our particular institutions. I think increasingly, as library costs escalate, I think there'll be much more collaboration between universities in terms of saying, right, we've got quality holdings here in Egyptian archaeology, other institutions haven't, therefore students who want to study this will have to come to this particular institution. So I think infrastructure is going to be a key thing in terms of postgraduate training. The second major shift, and it's a key issue I think that we have to address as research managers, is the shift from seeing postgraduate training as something that the individual did for himself or herself, where the responsibility is being shifted more to the supervisor and the role of postgraduate supervision, which is increasingly seen almost as teaching or training, so that we're now having national seminars towards excellence in postgraduate supervision, and there's a shift of responsibility to a complementary role. There used to be the saying that doing your PhD was like the race of the lonely long-distance runner, except in the sciences where people were, of course, in research laboratories and worked in groups. So this whole issue of the quality of supervision I see as one of the major issues in quality postgraduate supervision.